Alright, we might kick off. Hi everyone and welcome to the Australia Institute's Politics in the Pub evening. My name's Serena and I'm the Communications Manager at the Institute, but I'm also wearing two hats this evening because I'm also privileged to be on the board of the Canberra Environment Centre, who are co-hosting with us this evening, as this evening is basically the culmination of quite a significant project they've been working on, known as the Sustainability Challenge. I'm going to put in a plug for the centre and for the challenge after Barbara's talk. A very quick apology from Richard Dennis. Obviously he usually MCs these evenings, but he's over in Perth for a couple of days talking at a waste and recycling conference, talking about the food waste research that the Institute has done. He's also taking the opportunity to do a Politics in the Pub in Perth about the topic we talked about here a couple of months ago, which is whether or not we can afford the mining boom. We released a paper last week on the impact of the mining boom on the broader economy. If you didn't catch it, go to our website. We like to think it was quite a significant paper as well. Not mining tonight, it's a much more local topic, which we're calling Challenging Canberra, Creating a Sustainable City. This evening we're very lucky to have Professor Barbara Norman from the Canberra Urban and Regional Futures to talk to us on that topic. Professor Norman is going to offer her vision, or a vision, for a sustainable Canberra, one with better public transport, better designed suburbs, more community hubs. What else do we want? Renewable energy, access to renewable energy. She's also going to give us some tips in terms of what we can do as individuals, but also, I guess, what comes down to the responsibility of our politicians. If you don't know Professor Norman, Barbara is, as well as being the co-director of the Canberra Urban and Regional Futures, Barbara is also the head of Urban and Regional Planning at the University of Canberra. She's an adjunct professor at the ANU, and she's also got extensive experience in the public sector and is a former national president of the Planning Institute of Australia. So please join me in welcoming Barbara.
Thank you very much. What a wonderful scene out there. We've got a nice beer or a drink to enjoy. I'm Barbara Norman. Got this right. 2XX is recording. So get your questions ready. Thank you. I say this is a great forum because I've just spent the last hour giving evidence to the ACT Environment Assembly Committee, where every word went into Hansard. And so I was very succinct, and so it's really nice to be in a much more relaxed environment to talk about these issues. And I love questions, so I'll be as brief as I can be, and then let's have time for discussion. My background is urban and regional planning, just so you know a little bit about me, and environmental law, and I did a PhD in coast and climate change, and a couple of national roles you might be interested in. I'm on the National Coastal Climate Change Council, and I'm also now Deputy Chair of the Regional Development Australia Advisory Committee to Simon Cream on the whole Regional Development Australia Fund. So a couple of national roles, and obviously with our new program in urban and regional planning, which is only a couple of years, nearly 3 years old, coming at University of Canberra, very committed to training and working with the next generation of people who are committed to more sustainable cities in Canberra. I say that because for the first time in Canberra, we're actually going to have our own homegrown, born in Canberra, trained in Canberra, committed to Canberra, urban and regional planners. And many of my students are here tonight, which is fantastic, and will probably ask me really tough questions. So that's enough about me. Canberra and planning. I come from Melbourne and spent many generations down there, family, but spent all my formative years there. I did spend about 12 years here in Canberra in the 90s, and I was Director of Metropolitan Planning and Land Supply then, and I was also the ACT Housing Commissioner. So I've got a great interest in affordable housing. And then I went back to Melbourne for 10 years, and for family reasons, I came back to Canberra to take up this chair 2 years ago. The thing about planning is, decisions you make in planning take quite a long time to come through. When you go away for 10 years and come back, you can see the result of some of your decisions. Some of them are good, and some of them you've learned from, and I'll be happy to talk about that. Monica was a good example. So Canberra and planning. One thing about Canberra is it's passionate about planning. There is a joke that goes around this town, there's 370,000 planners here. Everyone's a planner. And I think that's a really good thing. Yeah, I know you think it's funny, but some of the community meetings can be challenging. I think it's fantastic, and I think that bodes well for our city. So, a sustainable Canberra. Well, as an academic, there'll be some academics here, probably is incumbent upon me at the very outset to explain what I think sustainability is. You know, often it's a word that's thrown around and people think, what does that mean? I don't have a whiteboard here, fortunately, but often sustainability is portrayed as a kind of trade-off between environment, social and economic, and where they intersect is what we call a sustainable future. I don't think that's a very helpful diagram anymore. I think that's a very sort of traditional approach, because often that leads us to the lowest common denominator about what would be a sustainable future. I'm much more supportive of a diagram that in fact has 3 concentric circles, and hopefully you can visualise this. The large one, which is the planet. The next one inside, which is society, and the one inside that, which is economy. In other words, the economy is not a function of itself, it's dependent on the society. Society is not a function of itself, it's dependent on the planet. It's the interdependence that's important. And I say that right at the front because it frames the way that I think about sustainability. No planet, no society, no economy. And so I'd be happy to talk about later about why I think that's important. That was developed by Professor Ian Lowe. He's now head of the ACF and was Australian Scientist of the Year a few years ago. So sustainability, that's how I define it. The other important point about how I approach issues is in terms of sustainability is the breadth. And all my students know this ad nauseum. We have to look at the environmental, the social, the economic and the cultural dimensions. So yes, we can talk about a sustainable city, but it's not just about the science and the ecology. It's also about behaviour. And if there's one lesson that we've learnt, and this is from my work on the National Coast and climate change, one lesson we've learnt about the whole climate change debate is, one, we have to engage with the community, and this is a great example, and secondly, behavioural change is critical to achieving those outcomes. Understanding the science is critical, but the science is not enough. And the third component, I think, around sustainability, just to frame this talk, is around community, education and research. We are, especially, and very especially, actually not especially, but especially, we are in the national capital. And here, more than anywhere in this country, we have distinguished, eminent academics, research institutions that we can draw on. And I think we need to build those connections much better between our national research institutions connected to public policy, connected to the community. And Canberra Urban and Regional Futures is committed to that, and I'll explain that again further in this talk. Those 3 things, the definition of sustainability, the breadth of sustainability, and the connections between research, public policy and community are the 3 kind of core elements framing what I'm about to talk about. So let's move on to what does this mean for Canberra, sustainable Canberra. Well, firstly, the environment. We have a very special environment in Canberra. People in Canberra understand this. People in Melbourne, I could tell you, don't. When I stand up and defend Canberra in Melbourne, I get a very different response. But I do stand up for Canberra when I'm in Melbourne and in other places. I think the structure of Canberra has laid the foundation for an excellent future. So I'm actually an optimist. And I know there'll be a few people here who think we've just lost the plot. But I think that we haven't lost the plot completely. We may be at a tipping point because of our growth, but I think we have a structure that we can actually work with in the future. Other cities are now looking at Canberra quite jealously. That basic structure of town centres, consolidation of growth in those town centres, and keeping the spaces in between green is something that many other cities look at jealously, because there's no way that they can recreate that or retrofit their cities the way we have today. I say that importantly now because we may well be at a tipping point with some of the pressures that we face, and I think we should be designing our cities and accommodating future urban growth in a way that does not dispense with that basic structure, because I think that this is very sound and will also increasingly place us in a position which can adapt to climate change. Second thing, our biodiversity, water, our flora and fauna is rich. You know, I live in Ainslie. I can walk out the door in the morning and I can walk up Mount Ainslie, and I do most mornings, although I hurt my knee. So if I'm hobbling around, I did that because I ran down yesterday morning, which was probably a stupid thing to do, but anyway, we do these things here. And so, but there is the point about this is that part of a sustainable city is not just about its environment and its biodiversity, it's also about a healthy city. And there's one thing about the design of our city also that we have here. I think it's very encouraging for exercise and for promoting health. And the fact that it's a city which one can walk out the door, be with nature very quickly. I know it encourages, inspires me. Every time you look out the window, there's someone running past or cycling past. It's quite inspiring. Whereas in other cities, you don't get that same opportunity. So that's something we should treasure in the future. Now, I mentioned climate change before, and I think, by the way, I think it's fantastic that the legislation for the personal view carbon price was introduced yesterday. It was absolutely a landmark moment, and I congratulate the government on doing that. Low carbon future and a resilient future. Much of the discussion is around that now. How do we achieve that? Now, those words sort of slip off the tongue very quickly. Is Canberra framed to be able to achieve that? Yes, we are, for some of the reasons I just outlined. Are we committed to that goal? Well, in rhetoric, yes. Are we in action? We have some way to go. And I'll go through those key issues now. Firstly, the positives. I think I mentioned climate change adaptation before. The spaces in between green, and this is some of the most recent work that's coming out now, actually provide us in a much better position to adapt. What do I mean by that? In the future, to be able to adapt, we will need space for what we call green infrastructure. Space for recycling plants, space for renewable energy, space for doing things in a different way, smart infrastructure. And we do have that in Canberra. So I think that's a really positive thing. Are we positioned to deal with other issues like transport? Well, we do also have the corridors for light rail and possibly for fast rail. Are we committed to doing that right now? No, as far as I can tell. Should we be? My view, absolutely we should be. I still get quite annoyed. I know we have Majura Parkways, and I understand integrated transport plans, and I understand the rationale for those sorts of structures of roads for dealing with freight and those issues. But I do still get annoyed that we find funding for roads, but can we find any money for 1 kilometre of light rail? No. Now, I don't think that's a rational way to be behaving. I don't think that we are acknowledging the public benefits and the tangible benefits for investing in public transport, and we need to change the way that we are making those assessments soon, now. So a low carbon future and resilient future. The unique thing about Canberra is that unlike other jurisdictions around Australia, the built environment is the dominant, apart from transport, the built environment is the other dominant sort of contributor to greenhouse emissions. So we're not dealing with a whole agricultural Murray-Darling. We're not dealing with that sort of thing. But what that means, I think, is just a great opportunity through the planning system and the building system to affect change if we decide to. I discussed that with the Assembly Committee this afternoon. It's in Hansard. You can go and read the transcript if you're feeling bored one Sunday. I'm sure you probably won't. But it's the levers are there in Canberra. And the levers aren't just there in Canberra. We have more levers in Canberra than any other part of Australia because we have a leasehold system. We have more levers here because we have an ability to more directly, if we choose to, more directly intervene in the process. So that's a public policy choice. And so I think that the opportunities are significant here. There is a limitation, and I've said this on the public record, and I might upset the industry here, but certainly when I was here before as Housing Commissioner, and I see it the same now, although there is some positive signs of change, I think we need more competition and innovation in the housing market. and in the commercial market. You see some nodding here. You know, we're not Melbourne, we're not Sydney, we don't have the big players, we don't have that inspire that competition, and somehow we need to think our way through that. Now, what happens in other jurisdictions in Australia? Quite often you have a public body.